So the way I set it up, typically, so we've done a lot manually, right? Placing a buy, typing it into an Excel, printing out a piece of paper, getting someone to sign it, scanning it back in. By using AI and agentic tools, we're able to have different places and spaces talk to each other. The airline industry, it was all like chaos when your flight got canceled. You had to wait on a line. You had to talk to a representative. Now, if you get a message on your phone, and that's all AI and that's all agentic. And what we're finding is making all these organic changes is yielding millions of dollars in conversion. And it's just simple changes like updating your content to be more consumer focused, the right message at the right time.
Well, hello and welcome to the AdTech Heroes podcast. I'm your host, Jon Wallett, and this is exciting because this is the first episode of season 4, and I am your new host. So this is the first episode with me, and today's episode we have a very exciting chat. We're going to be talking a lot about commerce, specifically reimagining commerce for the agentic era. Infusion of how is all these new forms of technology influencing that space. And I have a very exciting guest to join us in my first episode. I'm delighted to be joined by Amie Owen. She is the Global Chief Commerce Officer across IPG Mediabrands. Not only is she an expert in the space, not only is she fantastic at what she does, she's a dear old friend of mine. So I'm very excited to have her aboard and looking forward to kicking things off. So let's start with Amie. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I have to tell you, I just want to walk around and have you in my pocket because that was a great intro.
I can be of service. I do charge a pretty serious premium. So
This is awesome. I love the whole theme. I love talking about commerce, and we go way back. So I'm all here for it.
I love it. I love it. And that's where I really want to kick things off and start up. And that really begins with your career journey. So let's start way back when. So you're coming out of college. What really sparked your initial interest in advertising? How did you get involved in this wild world of not just commerce, but advertising in general?
So you're gonna laugh. So I majored in marketing at Syracuse University, and Syracuse happened to have a career fair, and I didn't even know what I wanted to do. And so all my internships, my dad grew up in the fashion world. I did a lot of fashion interning, cutting swatches of fabric and things of that nature. And so I went to this career fair, and I was like, "Hey, I'm majoring in marketing. I should just apply for every single job that has marketing in their company title." So there was 3 or 4 of them, and the one that stuck out was News America Marketing, and I sat down and did an interview, and, the guy that was interviewing me at the time said, "If you had a dress and you were wanting to sell it to me." I don't know what I said at the time, but I sold it to him, and he hired me, and News America Marketing, now known as Neptune Solutions, and it's selling in-store signage. So I actually didn't even know what I was stepping into, and it was kind of like kismet in a way where it was like they had marketing in their title. I talked about selling a dress, which happened to be the exercise of me being in the fashion industry and with my internship was pretty easy for me. And then I just started working in the big city, and that was my dream of to always be in the city, sit in the corner office and be able to kind of run the company and teach people and be the trend setter. And so I took the job and I was selling in-store signage, which is, believe it or not, a form of retail media and commerce. And I learned pretty He's still around too, and I've learned pretty quickly that people don't realize that, and it started, I'm gonna drop this, a little bit of, a fun fact, but it started in 1972. So when people think, retail media and commerce came within, the last 25 years or so, in the 2000s, it actually no, it's been around for decades, and that's where I started my career, and I learned a lot, when it came to in-store media and selling, and I do have to attribute them, they were a News Corp company. They've been sold a few times over since then. So they were pretty strict, but they had a really good training program. I've had to do consultative selling. So it didn't matter what you were selling, but it was all about, listening, understanding who your client is, how to build relationships with that client, how to actually have a good meeting. And so that was kind of the basis of my career where I started. And I just so happened to step into the retail media space and didn't even realize it.
That's wild. I love that the start of your story somewhat feels like, that scene from Wolf of Wall Street where he's like, "Sell me this pen, sell me this dress," and you rose to the
And he
occasion.
was,
It's
like,
so
super
great.
nice too, and it was funny, and it ends up being someone who, went to Syracuse, I still am friends with him today, he's, like, one of my mentors, he's, like, still in the space. He's jumped around a few, so he's not at new News America, which is called Neptune. He's awesome guy, like, he's not even, like, intimidating, but, like, for some reason, like, yes, that story, everyone's like, "Wow, that was how you got into it?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll let that slide." Yeah, like, might as well bring it
Well, it's great because I think that's a very humble beginning, right? Trying to figure out who you are coming out of college and, having your passion in fashion, having that evolve into this. So, but where you are then and where you are now, right? Global Chief Commerce Officer, it's huge. So I think a lot of people ask when they hear a title like that, they say to themselves, what's a typical day look like for you? So can you tell me a little bit about that?
There is no typical day. Like, just being, like, transparent. It's just, like it's interesting because it's a newly coined title, I feel, in this space. I feel like commerce is new in itself. So, like, going back to, like, I was on the sales side, I jumped over to the agency side, and then my role, with my first agency was to actually negotiate in-store signage for my clients. So, like, I was on the other side of the table with the News America at the time, and I really learned that there was this need for understanding retail media, and at the time, there were a few shopper agencies around, or shopper marketing agencies, but they really didn't dabble in the media side of it. So it was kinda new, and so, we leaned into that space a little bit. I was at that first agency for about 5.5 years, and they actually deprioritized retail, and that's why I'm not naming them. But ultimately they were like, "Hey, retail is not gonna be a thing, so, like, we should figure out what else you wanna do in your career." And I also had someone reach out to me on LinkedIn at the time, which was unheard of, for a job at University of McCann, almost 12 years ago. And so I came over here and they said, "Do you wanna build the discipline? Do you wanna be a strategic hire?" So I did, and I was like, "Cool, that sounds awesome." I took the job, I was a team of 1. I, worked on a candy company account, like, in the very beginning, and it kinda grew from there where we were going to our clients and saying, "We do this." And it was interesting because a lot of holding companies or, like I said earlier, the shopper marketing companies weren't even doing anything of around, retail media. And so, it had always been something that we were doing, and we kinda blew up, within these walls around, like, 2019 when we won, I think it was, like, 2 or 3 major CPGs on the same day when it came to retail media. We were calling ourselves Shopper at the time because commerce, again, wasn't a thing, right? And we were really focusing on getting people in stores or people down specific aisles in a brick and mortar store. Digital was, like, cute. It was like, "Oh, haha, you have digital on your plan, but, like, let's really just make sure that we're getting, someone down the aisle." And then COVID hit. So, COVID actually developed different ways of people actually buying, and so people were buying online, picking up at store, getting it shipped to their house. Like, I remember, like, buying something online, like, from Instacart, right? So Instacart became famous around then, and, like, spraying it down with, like, Windex because, COVID, like, you don't know how you're gonna get it and things of that nature. And then retailers were like, "Hey, this is actually a new revenue stream. I should probably be investing in how to reach my customers and how they're buying with other retailers, but I should provide it to them." And what they found out pretty quickly is that all you need is data and technology and an audience essentially to build that. And so, now there's like 200 plus retail media networks out there, and now commerce is like it's sexy again. Like we used to actually the pitch used to be like, we're not sexy, but you need us to drive a sale. Now it's literally like we are the, like, shiny object in the room, and it's no longer going to a client and saying, "Hey, we can do this." It's like, "Hey, we can do this, and here's how we're thinking about it. Here's our approach." So it's been interesting because I've been trying to, and hopefully successfully from the outside looking in, is evolving what we do within our space, and so that's why I've been here for 12 years, and so, I feel like I was already in the leadership position before they were like, "Hey, here's your title, and, like, this is what you're gonna do." But in reality, I'm a builder and I love leading the space and being able to potentially predict the future and work with our clients to really strategize what to do. Because there's something new every single day, and you really can't be wrong in this space because it's just going to change. So it's just being I would say more in tune with yourself and really trusting your gut and just going for it and being confident, knowing that if you do fail, it's okay. But for the most part, like having a POV is what our clients and, like even internal, they're just kind of like, okay, great. Like, stick with your guns, be confident, like we'll ride that wave. And it's been really, it's been a great journey so far.
I love that, and I gotta say, I think it really speaks to the ethos of you. I think a lot of what you're describing about your story and what you deal with every day, it shows in your work, and I think a lot of people, I've seen you at panels, and I've seen you present ideas and POVs, and it's always brought with an authentic point of view. And with that, you mentioned like commerce is back, right? Or commerce never really left, but it's sexy now. And I think what's really interesting about the space, we talked about this a little bit, is that it very much is evolving, right? So you mentioned the story of how, your experience growing into this role was anchored a little bit, and picked up, it sounded like coming out of the pandemic, right? Because consumer behavior shifted. And now in the magical world of AI, which is moving away from this buzzword into now really reality in their everyday lives. It's very much going to change the way we think about commerce. So this is a great segue into the idea of agentic commerce. So for those that are not familiar with the term, can you define that a little bit and tell me where we are in its evolution right now? Like, what is the stage and how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, so the way I set it up typically and so I've been around the block, right? And I've been in the space for so long, so we've done a lot manually, right? And so think about like placing a buy, typing it into an Excel, printing out a piece of paper, getting someone to sign it, scanning it back in. Like that is literally like what we had been doing. By using AI and agentic tools, we're able to have different places and spaces talk to each other. So then you have like that Excel spreadsheet talking to an Adobe that's talking to, like an email that actually is building a network essentially to get that signature. And so we have been leaning into AI to make our jobs easier and less manual in that regard. Another really good example is that some people, when they have air conditioning, they have air conditioning units. And so think you have like a nine, bedroom house. You have to walk into every single room and turn on your air conditioning unit, right? So you're literally doing step two, all the way or through nine, right? If you bought a Nest, it's one click. So it's a system versus the tools and the steps, and so I start there, and then the third piece that really kinda drives it home is, you look at, like, the airline industry. In the beginning, it was all, like, chaos when, like, your flight got canceled. You had to wait on a line, you had to talk to, like, a representative, they had to phone a friend, like, you had to get a ticket, they had to print it out. Now, if your flight gets canceled, you get a message on your phone, and that's all AI and that's all agentic. It's all systems talking to each other to give you your new flight information, and it just kind of, automatically moves forward. So those are kind of like three examples, the best way to explain it. But the reason why I love it right now is because it yields so much free time for us to be strategic. Because what we were doing, and I bring up like, the Excel example, is that we were in Excels. And what that does is that it causes burnout, it causes chance for error, human error. Like it's just a lot of work and redundancies. So even being able to have tools that tools actually talk to each other is one thing. And so that was where we had started. Um, Current day, from an agentic system standpoint, we're learning that we can use agents to now actually power, I'll call them jobs or tasks that I just explained like they'll do it on our behalf. And so that actually makes it a little bit different in the sense of digital online. And so we've actually created and just announced the agentic commerce solution or agentic commerce systems. And so what that really is an agent tapping into our data sources and then looking online at certain different criteria to make sure that our clients are retail ready. And so your clients, today's world, like they're probably doing that manually. So the best example I could give you is if you go to like an Amazon like PDP page or something, And you're looking at that and saying, all right, now we're like in the back to school time frame. I have to change all of this creative. I have to change how I'm talking about the brand. I need to see if there's any bad reviews. I need to understand the assortment for back to school because now people are more like building their lunch baskets. So like they need more snacks. So there's a lot that you have to think about. The system that we've created can go in and do all of that for you if you actually feed it the right information with the right guardrails. And we're doing a lot of testing there where it could do it for one page, but it's great to do it for one page, but there are many pages. So if you think of a brand, there's sometimes 1,000 SKUs per brand. And then you think of how many retailer media networks that are out there. So it's like doing it so many times over. The agentic system can actually do it in 10 seconds and pull together what we call a brief, and then it comes back to you and says, "Here are all the changes that you should make because your competitors are doing that, because it's back to school time frame, because your, content and creative have been up for, X number of weeks, and also your, like, your ratings and reviews, like, that new flavor that people are really talking to, they, like, want it earlier. They want it sooner." So, like, we're actually taking all of that information and then sending that brief to a client, and the client's just, like, reading it or using another agent to read it and then say, "Here are the changes that we wanna make," and we do use that human element to make sure that we're making the right changes, but then we just go back and click a button and then everything is changed. So will be a time and a place that the human element may go away in that, example? Probably, but right now, like, we're kinda walking before we run to make sure that everything is kinda set up properly so that we aren't setting and forgetting it, but we are making the right decisions, and what we're finding is, like, making all these organic changes is yielding millions of dollars and in conversion, and it's just simple changes, like changing a title page on Amazon or, like, updating your content to be more consumer focused and having the consumer know that you're talking to them with the right content, with the right message at the right time. So it's I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I get really, really passionate about Agentic, and so that's kind of all of the different places and spaces that we're using it today and how it's grown, honestly, within the last 18 months.
I a lot of this I didn't even know. So it's really exciting to hear how you guys are using it to streamline a lot of these efficiencies on site, and I imagine that's driving better. You mentioned conversions, but it's also a better user experience for consumers. And I want to pivot just a little bit on this topic and get your thoughts outside of just the use case for marketers on their websites, also just consumer relationship, right? So, a lot of times, especially when CES, the term agentic or agents first started bubbling up, um, there is this idea that it's going to replace search engine marketing and things like that because you're essentially going to have your own concierge that's going to make decisions on you based on what they've learned about you as a consumer. So I'd like to hear your thoughts a little bit. I imagine you are thinking about that when talking to your clients, and how is that reshaping a little bit of that relationship between consumer intention, that purchase decision? What does it ultimately mean for marketers when you have this conversation with them?
Yeah. It's so interesting that you asked me that question because it's going to my answer's gonna change as we understand consumer behavior, and I don't wanna go old school and say, like, by looking at all the different generations, because we don't even build plans via demo anymore, but when you're looking at, like, our age, like, we are going to use the AI, but we actually wanna watch it do all of its steps to make sure it's getting the result that we want because we are the last generation that was in the physical world and the digital world, right? Then you look at like a Gen Zer, and Gen Z might be a little bit more open to having someone maybe shop for them when it comes to like their grocery list because their grocery list doesn't change. But if they want to make a statement with their clothing or like any sort of fashion or makeup, we're finding that they want to actually try it on. And even if it's like an AI try on and they want to actually be engaged with that. And then you get to like I don't even know what, like the next generation after that, like Gen Alpha or like even like the betas, right? And they're shopping in completely different ways. And so it'll be interesting to see how they actually inherit because I look at my 7-year-old son and like he shops with his voice. Like he picks up my phone and he presses the button and he's like, Amazon, okay, open Amazon and then opens Amazon. And then he's like, hey, I want like sneakers, Nike sneakers for
That's scary. That's scary.
So there's going to be a learning curve with them, but I think each how you're shopping, and it depends on how your audience is shopping, is how they're going to lean into the AI space. So you're going to see that learning, but I don't think it's going to be overnight. Like there's going to be some people that are going to use it for advice, and then they're going to buy it by themselves because they feel like they want to make that purchase, right? And then there are going to be some people that are going to, I'll call it like set it and forget it, and there's specific categories that, like, they'll just, like, lean into. And then like I mentioned, like, there's some that, like, we don't even know how they're gonna interact with it yet, and it's a little it's crazy for me, and then you like, think of, like, what movies are those? Like, Back to the Future and everything like that, and then you think of, like, "Oh, wow," like, did that really come to fruition or not? And so it's all about, like, what can you predict and how people are really starting to engage with it, and whether they know or not they even know they engage with it is another even complete story, so
Like, yeah, to your point, how does it become so organic, right? And how they conduct themselves. So which bucket would you put yourself in? Are you more like your son where you're open to, speaking to Amazon saying, get me these shoes, or are you like, I gotta try this on? Like where are you sitting in the paradigm?
I share that story because I've never thought to use my voice to go shopping, and
Yeah,
I know that
neither have
sounds
I.
kinda crazy, and I'm in the commerce space, and I know about Alexa, like, we were one of the first, like, agencies to even text Alexa shopping and, like, working with Google and all of those things, but, like, for me particular, I'm still starting my searches on Google or Amazon, and I don't know, I think it's just habit. But what's interesting is that when you do Google something, there is an AI bot that pops up now at the top that gives you the answer. So, like, you are using AI even if you're, like, quote, unquote, "Googling something," in air quotes. It's just interesting. So, I mean, I think, like, if there was, a shopping list when it comes to, like, bananas and bread and whatever you need to, like, buy, I'm cool with having someone do that. I don't necessarily need someone to tell me what I need weekly because my kids, unfortunately, are picky eaters anyway, so, like, I need to buy the same things all the time. So that's one thing, but, like, I feel like I want to still I'll buy clothes on Amazon, I will pick them out or wherever I'm buying them. I still wanna try them on. Like, I still wanna, like, make sure, like, I like them, and I still want to do that shopping for me. So I don't know if that will change, but that's kinda, like, how I've been personally using it, which is interesting in itself. Like, I probably should do a lot more of, like, the voice testing and things like that, but I have my sons to do that.
Well, I think would be a really fun follow-up is a year from now, we're gonna revisit this conversation and see where you are in that way of purchasing. I'm curious to see if you adapt to some new behaviors. But, coming off of what you just described and talked about, it brings me back to some other traditional ways of thinking about commerce and the evolution into this new agentic form. The notion of synchronized commerce. Like, what does that mean to you? And how does it differ from a lot of the earlier frameworks, like terms like total commerce? Like what is that in your purview? How does that come to life?
Yeah, it's funny. So it started out with commerce just being media, and I would say swim over to my island and we could buy any sort of media on your behalf and drive a sale. Like that's literally what the pitch was. And then we started talking about media inventory and buying that, but then how it doesn't matter if you're buying the inventory, you have to have the right message and the right creative and the right, like, they'd be at the right time, and so it was kinda like, well, then you have to kind of still understand the creative and also understand the media piece, right? So it came, like a two-legged stool or like a ladder, and then we started throwing out the words of total commerce, which I say is a four-legged stool. And it's all about retail readiness, technology, data, and then media and content. So it kind of like evolves over time. And then all of those pieces, they have to work together in order to actually drive sales and be successful. You can invest in one without the other, but it's not going to be a long-term strategy. The long-term strategy is to make sure that you're set up for success in all different, facets of commerce. You can't just buy the media. You have to make sure that your creative is displaying what you want to display and is in the right mindset. So going back to like a back to school or like fall's coming up, right? So like having that right creative, that right content, right message, and then making sure that you have the right technology. So the right like user flow is really important too in the shopper journey, and understanding what data you're using. And so that's kind of where total commerce came about. And then the last iteration so far, because I'm sure it will evolve again, is synchronized commerce. And so the underpinning of that is making sure that commerce is integrated into everything that we do when we're looking at a media plan. So, like shoppable technology, for example. So, like from a brand perspective, they're potentially buying like CTV. How do you actually make that shoppable, or how do you bring that back to the consumer or the store? So you can use the technology, you could drive people to the store, but it's like, how do you actually make sure that everything is underpinned with commerce, and commerce becomes that glue between brand and performance. And then we don't even talk about brand and performance anymore because it's the holistic journey. But the synchronizing part really is making sure that the left hand knows what the right hand's doing when you're looking at all of those four different areas. So it's not just, a brand campaign, it's a brand campaign that can actually be tied to the store.
That's great. And I think that's very much the way marketers are beginning to think, like you said, about connecting with consumers in a way that feels a bit more organic to their daily lives, right? It's if you have great access to data.
Yeah, they expect it, which is, like, kind of insane, but, like, I even expect it. Like, I want a page that says, "Hello, Amy. This is what you bought in the past. This is what we recommend." Like, consumers are expecting it to happen, so if you don't do it, like, you're already at a loss.
Right. So to that point, just personalization, I think, is a broad term that gets used quite a bit. And what you just described is a form of personalization that's, welcoming, right? Um, I think what I'd love to hear your thoughts about is another concept that I think complements what you're describing. It could be a fifth leg of that stool. I've never seen a five-legged stool, but
Me
the
neither,
idea of
even though they're
yeah,
up.
we're gonna make some calls to IKEA, but the idea of connecting with consumers in the emotional standpoint, right? Um, how have you guys begun to think about, obviously with the use of AI now, there's a multitude of different models out there and different ways of addressing a level of personalization, but is having like an emotional understanding of that consumer's relationship to content or brand. Have you tested any? Have you explored that, or is that something you guys are thinking about when it comes to commerce and sales?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kinda, like, 2 approaches to it. So one is the everyday, and the second is more of the cultural phenomenons that happen, and, like, how do you actually, like, pull on the heartstrings, essentially? And so the everyday, so we actually, created a store in our office, 2 years ago, and we had a beverage cooler, and the beverage cooler was able to track emotions as you were actually opening up the cooler, and on the outside of the cooler, you could actually advertise, and so it wasn't like we were using it, to track our clientele or, like, any, employees, but when we did a tour of our store to educate people, we talked about the capabilities that were there, and it understood if you were male or female, it understood how long you were standing there, and it understood if you were smiling, if you looked inquisitive, if you didn't have any emotion, if you were upset, and we were trying to tie it back to beverages. Like, I don't know, like, if you maybe, like, you looked tired, you grabbed, like, a soda. If you didn't look tired, you grabbed, a juice. Yeah, so I never tested it per se, but I knew about the technology and that it was there. There are companies out there that do a lot of testing around that. We have a company within IPG that actually focuses on that specifically for the store, and for like shelf placement, and how do you do eye tracking and emotions and things like that. So it's like every day. And then the other piece from a cultural standpoint is interesting because you have to have your ear to the ground of what's happening. Like, I can't go into this conversation without bringing up Taylor Swift, and I'm sorry, but, like, she is a genius because she breaks the internet, like, with whatever she announces. And so how do you understand, like, what's happening and moving forward? So that's more of a social listening maybe exercise, and or like a trending exercise. And so we actually do have tools within our fingertips. And so like what we can do is we could actually type into the tool like Taylor Swift, and you could see how people are reacting to her announcing like her latest album. and you could see, like, if people are happy about it, if they're sad about it, like, what's the next trend and, like, how people are really, engaging with that, and so we could pull that for brands, and we could send it to brands, and you have to be nimble, right? You have to, like, have people pretty much, like, on call because, like, if she announces it, then you could, like, kind of lean into it pretty quickly. But, like, that's something too from, like, a cultural standpoint, like, how do you actually track that? And so we actually have some of that technology in-house to understand. Um, but some brands, like, are trying to get with the culture, but they're just their processes are not as, quick with the pace, but we're getting there, and that's why we're working with them so then we can help them alleviate some of the turns that they have to take, to get something live to figure out, like, how to actually invest in something just like a Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Are you a Swiftie? Do you consider yourself one?
I watched her concert on TV. I didn't go to her concert. I would have gone to it. I am fascinated by, like, her Easter eggs, and part of me is like, I wish I would have thought of that, but I don't know if I call myself a Swiftie. I don't know. Like, I'm more like a Lady Gaga. Like, I love Lady Gaga. Like, I like more of that. I don't know if it's because of my age. I don't know. Like, I like her, but I'm kinda like she sings about her breakups all the time, and I don't like, I want a little bit more of an
You want a
underdog
little more
girl. Yeah.
diversity in the storytelling, right? I not to bash, Taylor, I wanna consider myself a Swiftie. I don't know what the criteria is to get to that definition of a person, but, I do admire that a lot of her songs feature an item of clothing, a color, and it almost if someone once told me she's just, like, writing out of her diary, I'm like or singing out of her diary. I'm like, yeah, I guess that works. If I did that as a teenager, I don't think anyone would be listening to that music, but I
I mean, a lot
digress.
of people connect with her. It's like that emotion. And so how do you get in on that? And, like, even, I'm blanking on what those bracelets were called, but, like, those bracelets are even a phenomenon because she wears them and out or the friendship bracelets,
Friendship bracelets, yeah.
that
It's crazy.
everyone keeps on buying and she gives them, and so, like, that's even a thing. So it's like, I think everything she touches is it's just like I wanna meet her, like, cons and PR and, like, her marketing team because, like, they're already probably planning something from, like, 2 years from now, like, we just don't even know it.
Oh, 100%. They're on top of it, and I think, this leads to one of my last topics I wanted to bring up as it pertains to commerce, and I bet you're saying, "How do we segue from Taylor Swifties to commerce?" But, Taylor as a brand, right? And you think about the role of brands in the age of AI commerce, right? Something that I thought about when doing some research about these topics was, how does the idea of brand still play a role in the grand scheme of e-commerce, right? When you combine things like having your own agent that's shopping for you, when you have marketers and e-commerce platforms using agents and AI to optimize that consumer path and journey and storytelling, does the brand still have a role? Like, how does that play into your psyche and your storytelling and your plans?
Yeah, I think they definitely have a role. I think there's a role for everything. That's the key where, like, my philosophy is that commerce should have a role across everything, but, like, conversely, when you look at the other side, brand always has a role. If you were running a website and you were only doing commerce specific media and you were only having it on e-com, you're gonna reach the same consumer over and over again. And you might build loyalty, but you're not going to grow anything, by talking to the same consumer. Maybe a little bit because there may be word of mouth, like, "Go to this website. I really like this, shoe," or whatever it is. But the brand actually creates the culture, the awareness, and the loyalty, and so if you want to reach other audiences or if you wanna reach outside of who you're already talking to, that's where the brand comes, to play, and it's all of the brands, like, the look and the feel and how they approach, and even, like, like, Gen Zers now, like, they look at, like, what charities they're aligned to, like, how do they, give back with sustainability, like, mantras and things of that nature. So the brand is equally as important when you're honestly trying to sell a product. It's not just necessarily like turning on, a campaign that drives conversions. It's all about the brand, and the brand is important, right? So, like, you want to make sure that your brand is synonymous with what you're doing, and if you do have a brand that has all the awareness, I still think it's good for a refresher, like, because there might be someone who is seeing your advertising and they saw it 9 times, and the 10th time, they're like, "Alright, I'm gonna try it." So I definitely think there's a role for everyone, when it comes to even like the brand perspective, and even talked about like culture, things like that. But my ask always is when there is a role for everyone, make sure commerce is one of those roles. And when we say everyone, commerce is included.
I love that. I love that. I think that's a great way to come to probably my final question of our conversation, which is if you had a superpower in ad tech, what would it be?
Okay, yeah, this is one you prepared me for, so I need to read what I
You
looked
notice
up.
how I slowed down the
You
delivery of
slowed
that
down. I
just
was like, okay, here
to
we go.
set you up. Here we go. Let's hear it.
Bigger than the
I'm excited.
last. So I was at dinner last night and with some friends, and we went around the room and talked about superpowers, and some were funny and some were, like the typical like, oh, I would be invisible and, I would do that kind of thing. But I don't know. I typed in like my persona and this kind of popped up and it called me the Visioneer. And it said, my superpower is being clairvoyant and understanding the pattern recognition of trends. And so it gave me my origin story, and I'm going to read it for you. But it says, born from the chaos of streaming wars, retail media networks, and AI disruption, the Visioneer emerged with a gift, the ability to spot cultural and consumer shifts before they trend. Where others see the noise, the Visioneer sees the future. Says powers detects the big next platform, behavior, or format before anyone else, connects fragmented media, retail, and tech into a single simplified story. I can't make this up. I'm like, this is me. Balances creativity and commerce, turning every big idea into measurable growth. Says arch nemesis, the silo squad, the forces of fragmentation that slow process, waste budgets, and confuse customers. And then it says, my signature move is the future flash, a burst of insight that shows clients not just what's working now, but will work in the years to come. And I was like, this is me. So I had to read it to you because there was no way I was going to be able to recite that word for word without reading it. But call myself the Visioneer.
That's fantastic. So if I had to put it in terms of comic book nerds, you're basically the Jean Grey of commerce.
Yes. If you could find someone who could draw me into a comic, like I would love that.
That is gonna be a that's gonna be in a frame waiting for you at IPG in a couple of weeks. You as That's fantastic. Amie, this has been extremely enjoyable. Thanks for making my first episode of season 4. Um, Easy, fun, interesting. You were the best and forever grateful for your friendship and for your hard work and your point of view. So I know that's all we have in terms of time for today's episode. Thank you, and I look forward to future conversations together and seeing you continue to flourish.
Well, thank you for having me. This was awesome. Good luck with everything. I think this is going to be an amazing podcast. So I'm appreciative that I was your first. And I know that there will be many more to come as you tap into your guests.
We'll do it in person next time. Thanks a lot, Amie.